Good day, and this is a recorded meeting, recorded session. So we'll be discussing the first portion of the juvenile delinquency topics. First is yung concept and definitions, and then next would be of the and history of childhood and delinquency. So, manang sa bus ninyo, that is part 1. So, so juvenile delinquency starts off with defining is or who is a juvenile. Juvenile is a young person, specifically a child, less than of majority, which in our country is 18 years old, who is under the legal system that may be dealt with for an offense in a manner different from that of adult. So, yung mga juveniles are those part of the society which are commonly called a child who is undergoing or who is now subjected to the legal system of our country because they have committed such acts which would be somehow misdemeanor or a crime against. So juvenile. So juvenile delinquency is a social behavior or act which does not conform with the standards of society. So juvenile delinquency, hindi naman lahat ng mga delinquent act at this definition is a violation of the law. So these are just simple misdemeanors na hindi na naayon or hindi naangkop sa kung ano ba talaga ang naasahan na actions ng isang child or ng youth. So these delinquent acts are against regulations and somehow the norms of society which kung hindi siya nabigyan ng pansin, hindi na pag-una ng it might result for that juvenile or for that child to increase the level into a full-blown criminal which would lead for that child to be a criminal. Yeah. So there are different definitions. Yan. Some of juvenile delinquency is then as a large number of disapproved or children and of for other definition or those anti-social acts or behavior na mga sin which deviates from the norm or from the normal pattern of social behaviors na angkop sa children. Next definition, to majority or legal age. Nag-ito sa bansa, depende sa statutes. So, in 3, the age of majority is age individual reaches 18 years old. Yan, or 18 years of age. Next, term emancipation. Emancipation is freedom from parental authority, both ownership and property. So, emancipation, it not require na yung child would reach 18 years of age. The emancipation stage is the or buhay ng isang youth or ng child kung saan he is free, he is free from the authority na parents, whether it is his own liberty or yung mga kagari-arian at so the common and formal turnover yan or age of emancipation is by the time na dumating or karoon ng sitwasyon na yung bata would reach the 18th year. Yan, or upon reach 18 years old. So, ganyan yun, emancipation. United States, iba din. When that's a time na they leave the parents' house, they would somehow start to live independently, whether in person or property. Okay. Next is delinquent. When we say delinquent, persons whose behavior has brought them into repeat conflicts with. So delinquents are commonly those terminating batas, those children in conflict with the law. So yung mga children in conflict with the law, yan yung mga ano sa delinquent definition. Ilagay ko lang dito sa baba. They're also called children in conflict with law or yung CI. Also, a delinquent is one who committed committed an offense that is violated violated the approved norms of conduct in which yung guilt niya is proven. Yan. So the key definitions we have for this subject. First is the juvenile. Next is a delinquent person, whatever age, whose attitude toward individual is against the norms of society, and it may lead that or that person into breaking the law. Yan yung so next definition would be antisocial behavior characterized by disobedience or disrespect to authority. Kumbaga, anti the societal norms. Yan. So, meron tayong mga definitions like, for example, yung parents patriae or doctrine of parents patriae or translated from Latin, that is father of the country, kung saan itong doctrine na to not consider those juvenile or delinquent acts of juveniles as a criminal violation. Ang was doctrine of parent tray, those delinquents and their actions would be non or would be removed of that criminal violation and cannot be found guilty of a crime and punished like an adult. So meron silang responsibility rin sa kanilang actions. They would be punished the same as with adults. And also, Prince Patre has this assumption that state will take over as the role of the guardian for that delinquent youth. Yan. State has the role of being guardian. Yan. Or simply the state as the parent of that delinquent youth. Yan. Only if the logical of the delinquent youth is incapable or unworthy of taking care or taking cost in control of the delinquent child. And kumbaga, the state has the parent. State has the control or custody of the child. That's why the SWD or local social welfare development would take control of those minors na biktima or guilty or certain violations of in which hindi sila turn over sa kanilang biological parents due to the fact that their parents are either incapable of taking to take care of or unworthy because of certain violations which found out during a deliberate or ng social workers. Yan. So, on behalf of the child, yung parents patri, state will take control, take the lead for the life of the delinquent child, any children. So, tayo sa previous, yan, status offenses. So, status offenses are acts or omissions which may not be punished solely or legally if committed by adults, antisocial or because the offender is a minor. Yan. For example, itong truth or reasonable absenteeism. School. Yan. Sige, absent times out of 10 lang pumasok in 2 weeks. That's true one. Use of profanity or profane language, and especially sa mga mas bata. Next is running away from home. Yan. So, running from home, yung tinatawag nilang part of vagrant. Yan. Kung saan yung bata, walang inuuwian na bahay. Vagrant. Also included are those status offenses kung saan smoking and drinking of minors. Yan, smoking and drinking, that's considered a status offense. Pinagbabawal na gawin ng mga bata. Yan. So, it is considered a violation if a child commits it, but generally, if an adult commits it, it is punished or it's not punishable. Yan. Included mendicancy or yung pakilimos sa daan. So, mendicancy or being beggar not illegal, but it's prohibited because those child will just focus on asking money from random on the streets and not having to which is ang purpose ng government to remove those children from the street and them have formal education. One of the status of this, not siya considered fully as illegal, but because of the funds associated with delinquent gangs or delinquent gangs, yung mga ginagawa nila would be considered as offense or a violation of the law. So, ayan. Yan yung status offenses, acts or omissions which are not punishable legally or usually by adults, but become anti-social or illegal or punished if the offender or the offenders are minors of those part ng youth. So before I proceed to the next, there are three definitions or three groups of delinquents. Juvenile delinquents, just wide. Yan. So, there are three ways to group juvenile delinquents. So, here are the groups of juvenile delinquents. So, number one, the first group are those children aging below 7 years old. So, for those children below 7 years old, obviously, wala silang control of what is happening around them. They don't have full sanity of anong ginagawa nila or wala silang enough knowledge to know what they are really doing. Kasi mga bata pa yan. Like for example, 5 years old. Alam mo na kung hihit-hit siya ng sigarilyo sama sa katawan niya, generally, they won't know the effects of it because they are child or a minor, below 7 years old. Next is the children aging 10 years old to 12 years old. So those children from 7 years old to 12 years are already called juveniles once they commit certain uh, prohibited acts. So dito, children na nag-edad ng 7 hanggang 2, they might have some of knowledge of what they are doing, or they are still able to discern right from wrong already. The thing with this, isang principle kasi from those children on this group is that they are those juveniles na merong tinatawag na Dolphin Capax. Doll in Capax or Dolly in Capax. So, Doll in Capax pertain to those children not capable of having criminal intent. So, yung mga under the category of children from 7 years old to 12 years old, some, if not all of them, have dull impacts. Hindi pa yan sila capable na magkaroon ng saling criminal intent. That's according to study. It was presumed by law na yung mga bata on that age bracket, hindi pa nila ma-discern talaga kung yung ginagawa nila is a violation or a crime or hindi. But the thing we can discern which is right from wrong, yung mga basic na right and wrong notions. Yan. The third group ng juvenile delinquents, those delinquents or children na tinatawag ng youth. These are youths from 12 years old but below 18 years old. Yan. So, for the third group, ito, youths from 12 years old but below 18 years old. Yan. So, meron silang tinatawag na conditional knowledge or yung intent nila. So those children under this group have this discernment within them. So wala na silang kapax, presumably. Kasi yung mga youth in this age bracket has niyang tinatawag na conditional discernment. Yan, conditional level of discernment. Kung saan alam na nila ang tama at mali, and during this stage, the mental capacity of a child na naging delinquent would have what we criminal intent at yung motibo nila is enough for a crime to be successfully committed. So, again, juvenile delinquents, meron lang three main groups yan. Yung below 7 years old without discernment, yan, dull incapax din sila together with children from 7 years old to 12 years old. Yan, dull incapax, capable of having a criminal intent. And then the third group are those youths from 12 years old to below 18 years old. Those who have discernment somehow in their mind, or those under our law na may conditional responsibility. Yan. Conditional responsibility sa kanilang mga actions. Kasi pwede na sila magkaroon ng intent. Okay, so if it is clear for you, can we proceed to the next topic? So, kanina, na-discuss ko yung three groups ng juvenile delinquency. Next, nandito yung three types of delinquency in general. First is yung environmental delinquents, whose youth or child delinquents were characterized by occasional law breaking. Kasi according sa studies or some theories, the children who have a somehow a an environment which has multiple occasions of crimes occurring around them, yung mga bata na dun sa environment na yun would have this occasional urge to contradict yung mga rules and regulations or law breaking activities na gagawin nila. For example, there might be an urge for a certain child to steal or magnakaw. Yan. So the next type of delinquency is yung mga emotionally maladjusted delinquents. Those delinquents on this type are those who are chronically breaking the law. Yung palagi na lang increased ang law breaking which became a habit. Yan, naging habit na para kanila. And yung kanilang mental framework or yung kanilang emotions or yung mentality for the delinquents, hindi na nila ma-avoid within themselves. Yan. Kasi yung ginagawa nilang mga actions, mga delinquent behavior nila is somehow showing signs of having mental illness. Mental illness, yung mga signs na kung saan yung emotion nila by reason of certain in their certain trigger points sa kanilang behavior na mag-increase talaga yung emotional level na gumawa ng krimen. Kumbaga, their emotions are easily triggered by certain events. But sa psychiatric delinquents, ito na yung mga may tendency to mental illness because they are diagnosed with a mental incapacity, a serious emotional disturbance in which hindi nila individually ma-control, and of course their actions would lead into violent behavior. So next, we have those types of delinquent youth. Meron tayong social delinquents. Yan, characterized by aggressiveness. Those individuals who hated or resents authority or the government or anyone who makes an effort para makontrol or mabawasan yung delinquent behavior. So ayan, yan yung delinquent behavior na socially aggressive. Next is yung mga neurotic delinquent youth or those who has internalized yung conflicts niya and is preoccupied with his or her own feelings. Those who are under this category, meron silang mga pinagdadaanan sa kanilang sarili which they are not really commonly na nilalabas or pinapalabas yung kanilang mga pinag-iisip. They are preoccupied. Meron silang mga events or mga bagay na hindi maalis sa kanilang isip at somehow naiirita sila within themselves. When we say asocial, this type of delinquent youth are those acts na ginagawa nila na may somehow, ang term nila is a cold, brutal, and vicious intent. Kumbaga sa asocial, yung mga actions ng mga delinquent youth dito, wala nang pinagsisihan ang gumawa or the youth didn't regret what he did if they are classified dito sa asocial delinquent youth. Like for example, maybe papatay na sila without feeling any remorse or even guilt. At yung manner ng pagpatay nila, for example, is yung mga brutal na pamamaraan na adults usually are the ones who can be able to commit. Next is yung mga accidental delinquent youths. These are youths or delinquents who are essentially sociable, law-abiding sila within the norms of society, but happens to be at the wrong place and at the wrong time. The reason is, baka meron silang mga peers or mga kaibigan na involved much in delinquent acts at sila ay napasubo or not really typical sa kanila na gumawa ng delinquent behavior. Yan, yung mga nasa wrong place at the wrong time. Okay? Next, So next are the different approaches in the study of delinquency. So meron tayong mga iba't ibang approaches which could help determine the root causes or explain the occurrence of delinquent behavior to children or yung sa youth. So first is yung biogenic approach, in which this approach gives an explanation that law violators and delinquency are a result of the same physical defects. Yan. So it's basically ruled out from the biology or the biological makeup of an individual or a delinquent. So next is yung psychogenic approach. Sa psychogenic approach, it argues that the critical factors in delinquency are personality problems to which misbehavior is presumed to be the response. So personality problems to basically occurring within the man or acts within the man, in which ang last resort sa kanyang problema is misbehavior. Yan yung common response. And of course, yung psychogenic or sociogenic approach. Yan. So sa sociogenic approach, it viewed that youthful misdeeds or their delinquent acts are a result of a learning process through interactions with other members of society. So for example, siguro na-curious yung isang bata kung anong mangyayari kung magnanakaw siya ng, sabihin natin, ballpen. So nagnakaw siya ng ballpen sa mall. So by the time nakuha na niya, papalabas na siya, sinita na siya ng security guard. So yun, tinanong siya, he was somehow interviewed, and yung actions, mga responses niya, mga reflexes niya nun, would somehow be part of the learning process na hindi na niya yun gagawin ulit. Okay? So, next is yung mga different theories naman tayo concerning delinquency. So, there are different theories which can explain the occurrence of delinquent acts by minors. Okay? So, first of it, yan, una niyan is yung choice theory. Yan. So, from the word choice, based sa classical school of criminology, na kung saan ang isang individual would have what we call free will. Yan. Or the freedom of action in choosing what must be done, what he can do, and the individual or the mind of that individual can calculate if he can gain or lose something when he commits a certain act. Yan. So that's a viewpoint in the occurrence of a delinquent behavior kung saan, for example, a motivated or more motivated offender na kadalasan sinasaway dahil sa constant na paglabag sa batas because he can see yan sa kanyang pag-iisip na merong benepisyo or there is a price once na yung mga controlling factors are absent. Yan. 'Di ba yung sa triangle of crime, pag meron na siyang motive, meron na siyang opportunity, yan, or motive, opportunity and intent. Once na wala na yung ah, capable guardian, pwede na niyang gawin yung krimen because his motive is that yung price from committing a certain act is bigger, and that is within his free will. Next is yung biosocial or yung trait theories. So trait theories are based on the view that both thought and behavior have biological and social basis. Kung saan meron siyang three sub-theories, yung biochemical, neurological, and genetics. Okay, so next is dito tayo sa neurological theories, in which it explains that crime and delinquency occur because the individual suffers from brain impairment or abnormality sa structure ng brain. So from the word neuro, which means the mind, it tackles about the makeup or yung composition ng brain. If there's an abnormality or an impairment sa pag-function ng brain. So basically, delinquent acts coming from people who have this illness are characterized by learning disabilities, yung may kahirapan sa pag-retain ng mga natutunan. And of course, there is this what we call yung ADHD. Yan, ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. So, yung ADHD or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, it claims that merong mga tao na siguro nagiging active, it's because there is a deficiency of attention towards them. Kung saan kinakailangan nila ng attention, but once they cannot attain the attention they deserve or they needed, then they would be characterized by hyperactivity. So nagiging overactive sila or hyperactive. Yan. So common na characteristics nito is that they are preoccupied once walang attention sa kanila. They become impulsive in their actions. That's why they are somehow very active without the attention. And once they get the attention they deserve, yan, meron na silang sluggishness and somehow others would daydream. Next is the genetic theory or from the word genes. It explains that delinquent traits and predisposition to criminality are inherited from parents. So, for example, yung theory kung saan na-based yung si Ada Duke, yan, mother of all criminals, and yung theory ng Edwards family tree, na kung saan, kung ano ang behavior ng mga parents would be passed on somehow through the genetic makeup, and then papunta na sa mga offsprings, and then so on and so forth. Yan. So also is supported by the criminality of parents and how their children would perceive the criminality or the actions of their parents. So next, psychological theories, dito tayo. So sa psychological theories, yung mga viewpoints dito, they see delinquency as a result of an emotional and mental disturbance ng isang individual. Kung saan merong mga bagay na bumabagabag sa mga individuals who are diagnosed with a psychological misbehavior or a psychological imbalance. Yan. Whether it is a cognitive deficiency or the dynamics or ever-changing na pag-uugali ng isang tao or yung certain mood swings. So, psychological theories have three sub-theories. First is yung psychodynamic theory, which is based on the psychoanalytic theory ni Simon Freud. So, according to the psychodynamic theory, delinquency is a result of the imbalance ng three personality components, si id, ego, and superego. So, kung medyo dominant si id, then it is already an imbalance. Yan. It's like balancing or juggling three balls. So, also sa psychodynamic theory, delinquency is a product ng abnormality ng personality ng isang tao, and it is, of course, formed in the early stages ng life. And of course, once na-retain yung abnormality hanggang lumaki yung bata, it becomes harder to eliminate. Next is behavioral theory. Yan. So, in this sub-theory, it believes that individuals learn by observing how people react in this behavior or how to react in their behavior. So, yung mga na-classify dito sa behavioral theory, a certain individual might have a triggering behavior once he sees that another person has a positive reaction or a negative reaction sa kanyang ginawa. For example, yung misbehavior ng children. So if one of their guardians sees that yung pagiging misbehaveful or yung pagkakaroon ng misbehavior ng kanilang mga anak is having a positive response from their guardians, then makikita ng bata na, okay lang pala kanila mama at papa. Sige, manatili na lang akong ganito. Or they would continue acting differently. Or they would misbehave and continue to misbehave up until the time na meron ng negative reaction. Like for example, sa atin noon, when we were kids, yung bata pa tayo, 'di ba napapansin niyo kahit ngayon, kung may makita kayong bata, 'pag sinusubukan nilang kainin ang laruan nila, may mga parents na kinukuha agad yung laruan at somehow pinapalo yung kamay ng bata. So of course, once the child sees na, ginagawa ko 'to, pero hindi gusto ng guardian ko or ng mga matatanda at pinapalo ako, then in the future masasabi niya na, ah, papaluin ako 'pag kinain ko 'to. So, hindi niya gagawin. So, if a good behavior training is done from childhood or early childhood up until adulthood, yan, mapanatili yung magandang behavior, then it could sustain and prevent the occurrence of criminal behavior. So, ang pinaka-critical dito is yung sa early childhood up until the adolescent period. Yan, kung saan yung knowledge of the surroundings and the environment and the ever-changing behavior ng mga kasamahan or ng mga tao would be understandable to a child. This is very important na magkaroon ng guidance ang mga children from early childhood up until the age of adolescence. Yan, yung teen years. So once it is unchecked by guardians, especially the parents, then misbehavior would continue and somehow evolve into a full-blown criminal behavior. Next is cognitive theory. So sa cognitive theory, it views on the cognitive behavior, the faulty perception and analysis ng isang delinquent individual towards a certain delinquent action. It also believes that when an individual makes decisions, he engages in a cognitive thought process. Kumbaga, nandito yan, when an individual is about to make a decision, before the decision comes, merong mga thought processes na nangyayari within him to gauge or mabalanse kung asan ba dito yung mas paborable sa akin, mas paborable sa iba, or asan ba dito yung disadvantage sa amin. Yan. So, the cognitive thought process goes with the following. Yan. First, na-encode yung information so that it can be interpreted and analyzed by the person internally. And then, once na isip na niya na, o sige, hindi ako pwedeng bumaba sa slide kasi baka madisgrasya ako. Yan. He search for the proper response. For that example, madidisgrasya siya pag bababa na siya sa slide. Yan. For example lang. So, yan yung second stage. The individual searches for a proper response once the information has been interpreted and decide upon the most appropriate action. For example, isang drug pusher na huhulihin na ng pulis. So, nung nakita niya na yung buy bust, yung pusher buyer, or yung pusher buyer is police, so immediately sa kanyang mind, information has been relayed to him na, oh, police to, delikado. Yan, compromise na ang pagbebenta ng droga. So once he would create a decision, or before he would create a decision, i-interpret niya na, police to, kailangan kong tumakas. But what if hindi siya makatakas? So, he would interpret na, police ito, i-encoded the information of police ito, at kailangan kong lumaban. So, yan yung magiging response, the secondary action. And once the response is being done, or nagkaroon na ng action, meron ng action from that response, then sabihin natin, tinangka niyang lumaban sa pulis. So, sabihin natin talaga ng pulis na hawod kayo mamusil, na number 1 sa training sa BISOC, then nabaril niya ang drug pusher. Yan. Of course, that is legal. Yan. So, he acts on his decision, yung kay drug pusher, but the result was his death. As you see, yung thought process nyo, may encoding of information. Then, the information is interpreted. Then, once the interpreted information has acquired a response, then the action from that response would be done. And once that action is being done, That would somehow be the overt decision. It shows the overt act of an individual. In that case, sa example, yung overt act niya is nanlaban siya sa pulis. So, namatay siya. That is for cognitive theory. May thought process muna bago ginagawa ang isang bagay. Next up is sociological theories, which I would discuss next time. So, for this meeting, I would end my discussion up until cognitive theory. Next time, we will be discussing sociological theories. Yan, yung apat na social theories. Yan, social structure, social process, social reaction, social control. Okay, so I hope you would study with the notes, pati mga documents na sinend ko. And hopefully by the third exam, maganda ang resulta ng exam ninyo. Okay, so once again, thank you, and this is all for the meeting today. God bless sa inyong lahat.